This is the Toshiba SR-B2 turntable from 1982. It's a belt-driven machine with an automatic return. Now, this is not a high-end piece of equipment, but it is in great shape for its age. It's very reliable and it has all the essential components of a standard turntable. So what I thought I'd do today is give a basic rundown of how to set up a turntable if you're a first-time user and you just picked up a used one, or you're just thinking about buying one. It's actually very easy and anybody can do it. So let's get into it. I have had this Toshiba SR-B2 for a little over a year now, and I think it's about time we talk about it. To be forthcoming, I am not going to sit here and claim it's some high-end masterpiece, but I really don't think that it's junk by any means. It's been hauled back and forth in multiple moving trucks, left in a hot storage unit, and jostled around quite a bit more than it probably should have been, and yet it works fine still, has no issues, and sounds as good as when I bought it, albeit at an estate sale. It's a belt-driven turntable. If you're unfamiliar, there are typically two ways that these tend to couple to the motor. They're either direct drive, where the platter itself is on top of the motor output shaft, or they offset the motor and hook it on with a belt like you have in this case. Which one is better, if you ask me, is entirely subjective. There are arguments for both sides, but the truth is it's too complicated to give a simple black and white answer. So I say, whatever you have, that's what's best. If you lift the rubber slip mat off, you can see the aluminum platter. If we turn the platter a little bit, you can actually see the spindle coming off of the motor. The drive belt wraps around it and couples to the platter on this inner ring. You have the option of two speeds, 33 and 45 RPM. For the most part, that used to correspond to 12-inch and 7-inch records, but now a lot of records you buy could be either speed no matter what size they are. I have just as many 33 RPM 7 inches as I do 45. Same goes for my 12 inches. A lot of the times, they'll be printed on the label, except sometimes they aren't. That's why it's nice to have a button to easily switch speeds if you guess wrong and end up getting chipmunk music. The way the buttons work is actually pretty simple. It's just a lever attached to a plastic ramp that pushes the belt onto two different diameters on the spindle shaft. The motor never actually changes speed. I appreciate the simplicity, honestly. It's cheap, yes, but I find it clever. And simplicity is the name of the game with this turntable. There's no power button. The turntable will begin spinning as soon as you move the tone arm over the platter. If you move the tone arm back, it'll stop. They've done their best to give you all the necessary features of a proper turntable, but they've made it as basic as it can be. And truthfully, that's the beauty of a unit like this. It's easy, which is perfect if all you want is something to play your records. So, to play a record, you just open the lid, select an album, we'll be using a personal favorite of mine today, and place it on the platter. Next, you unclip your tone arm from its little tower and lift the cue lever. That'll raise the little anvil that lifts the tone arm up and away from the record platter. Then you move the arm over to the lead-in groove, make sure you've got the speed right, and lower the cue lever. That's all there is to it. I know I'm explaining something that's very obvious to a lot of you, but this channel is, after all, meant to be accessible to someone who's never done this before. So we're starting at the beginning. As the record plays, the tone arm will move inward until it eventually hits what's called the runout. When it gets there, the turntable will automatically lift the arm up, move it over, and set it back onto the tower of Barad-dûr, and set it back onto the armrest. If you want to stop it early, this large button on the bottom will engage the automatic return mechanism and the arm will return to its rest. And I have to point out, I love the super 80s vibe on the top of this button. That is peak style right there. Masterful industrial design work aside, that's really all of the functionality. It plays, it stops, and it changes speeds. It's about as simple as you can get. However, if you look toward the back, there are two features molded into the plastic. On the left is an indent for a 45 adapter, which it likely came with originally, but was lost before I bought it, so we're just going to use mine. The other feature is this little hole. That's where you can place the head of the tone arm. I'm not entirely sure why you would need to do that, but to do it, you would undo this little thumb screw, and then you can pull the head off and gently place it into the little keyed receptacle. Lastly, you have the dust cover. It's just on spring-loaded hinges and can easily slide off if you need to remove it. Otherwise, it has no other features, and I would argue it doesn't really need any. The power cord and the RCA cables are hardwired into the body and are not removable. The ground wire is just a bare wire and hooks onto the ground on the back of your receiver, which is usually next to the phono inputs where you'd plug it in. And do be sure to hook that ground up or it will sound like you have bees in your living room. Okay, so now that we've gone over the extensive list of features on this turntable, let's talk about how to set it up. Normally, when a record player is brand new, you're supposed to set the tracking force, which is the pressure your stylus exerts on the record as it plays, and the anti-skate, which is, in simple terms, a mechanism that stops the tone arm from Wayne Gretzkying all over the place. Those are meant to be set up once and left alone. But if you're buying your record player from a second-hand store, chances are people have messed with it and turned the dials and screwed it up, so it's a good practice to start from scratch before you try and play anything on it. Don't worry, it's not hard to do at all. We'll start with the tracking force. Now, every stylus is slightly different and wants a different amount of tracking force. The easiest way to know what that is to just Google the cartridge or the turntable and it'll usually tell you, assuming it's the original cartridge that it came with. In this case, Toshiba specifies a tracking force of 1.75 grams. There are tools like scales available online for getting this exactly right, and if you're willing to buy them and use them, I would highly encourage you to do so because it will make your life a lot easier. However, they are absolutely not a requirement, and we're going to do it without a scale using a method known as zeroing out. If you look at the tone arm, there's a large round bit at the back. That's the counterweight, which will move back and forth as you spin it, working essentially like a balance scale. The first thing you want to do is twist the counterweight until you find the point where the whole tone arm balances completely horizontal. I find the easiest way to do that is to raise the Q lever and put the needle over the record and continuously twist the weight and drop the needle to see when it stops dropping down to the record. That'll be the point when it's zeroed out. Now that it's balanced, and without turning the weight itself, you would want to set the free spinning numbered disc to 0, then turn both the weight and the disc until it gets to your desired setting. However, I have to do it a little bit differently here because the scale will turn backwards if I do it that way. So I'm going to put 1.75 grams at top dead center and turn it until I get to 0. But it's the same idea. In theory, that should put it at exactly the recommended tracking force for this particular cartridge. As a general rule of thumb, you want to set the anti-skate to the same number as your tracking force. So we'll go ahead and do that now by turning this little dial to 1.75, or as close to it as I can get. It's not very precise. However, if all has gone according to plan, your turntable should be ready to go. Let's see if it works. Success! It's not exactly braving the fires of Mount Doom, but it's an accomplishment nonetheless. And hopefully, if you just got your first turntable from the Goodwill or a yard sale or from your Uncle Dave, you can now set it up and start collecting and playing records, which is awesome. So thank you for watching with me. If you're a fan of vintage hi-fi like I am, and you want to see what kind of weird stuff I find at estate sales and thrift stores, consider subscribing, because I've got lots more odd pieces of equipment that I'd like to show you, and we are always out shopping for more. And remember, do not let anyone make you feel bad for the pieces of equipment that you have. Even if it's not a premium brand, it is still fun to use. So get out there and thrift, and tell me in the comments what you found. So until next time, stay metal.